Our next guest is a visionary who has shaped the landscape of urban radio programming. With a career spanning over 2 decades, he has played a pivotal role in leading some of the most influential stations in the country. As a former vice president of urban formats for Cumulus Media and now the president and CEO of Mean Old Lion Media, his expertise and leadership have left a lasting impact on the airwaves. Please welcome to Hey Cuzz podcast, the legendary Ken Johnson. Hello and welcome back to the Hey Cuzz podcast with me, your host, Silivea J, here at the Hey Cuzz podcast, your favorite Cuzz cast, where you are either a real cousin or a play cousin. And today we have a play cousin on. His name is Ken Johnson. He is the CEO of Mean Old Lion Media.
Yes.
He's here to talk to us and tell us a little bit about where he's been, what his journey has, and what has gotten him thus far. Ken and I go way back. I consider him a friend. At some point, we all thought that we were cousins because we have the same last name. But when I met Ken, my last name was not Johnson. When I met Ken, it was about 3 weeks, I think 2 weeks before I got married. So that's how long ago it's been. And it was 1997, Ken. Welcome.
It was 97, but I don't remember anything other than Johnson. I don't remember what your name was before Johnson. So
right before I got married, we were working at a radio station that I think it was what was it, like a 5-watt station, 5-mile watt station? 94.
I don't remember it being that low. I remember it didn't have the greatest signal, but yeah, I don't remember what the power was now at the time. So
there have been a lot of major shifts in radio. How have these changes impacted the outlook of where the industry is headed?
I mean, that's a loaded question. I mean, that would take a fair amount of time to answer. I mean, if I was, I don't know, if I was like had a negative outlook, I probably go one way. I will be positive in the fact that, again, radio still gets, and I don't know what the number is now. They used to say it used to be 95 million people a week listen to radio. I know that number has gone down. I've seen it go down to like 92, and that was a while ago. But anyway, I don't think radio is going away, but it's definitely not what it used to be. And I've seen it change over the years from this really, community-based, focused station to kind of being an affiliate of a big corporate, company. And so, yeah, it's not what it used to be. And again, I'm not going to sit here and belittle radio and say, oh, that's bad. I mean, that's for people who listen to the radio all the time. I'm not in radio really. I mean, I still consult a gospel station in Philadelphia. And again, the goal with that is to keep it very community focused. But yeah, I have, really switched to more digital and doing podcasting and more digital content, through social media. So that's what I've been doing.
Well, interestingly enough, when I first met you, you were this community person. I mean, you came out of DC. DC has always been like this one big community. I have an uncle who raised his children in DC. So I want to say that I still have some family there, even though they've moved to Nevada. But you can't live in DC and not be a part of communities, kind of like in Atlanta. That's those two cities that come to mind that are very community oriented, community based. And then working in urban AC radio, when you came to a small town, that years after you left, when Cumulus came and bought up other stations, they did the same. And so you have always been this community person. So with all of the changes in advertising and where traditional stations have gone, what do you think about independent? What advice would you give someone who still wants that to be a program director? I mean, what is that even anymore?
Later on, I have to speak to some students at Norfolk University about radio and programming.
Hmm.
Um, it really is back to what it used to be in terms of just focusing on the music, focusing on the personalities. You really have to be focused on what's going on in your area. I mean, listen, the thing that you used to just compete against radio stations, right?
Yes,
But
right.
now you don't, right? You can hear, younger people get their music choices from TikTok now, right?
And Spotify.
And yeah, and so again, you can hear music everywhere on the web and on the internet, and also you're competing with people sitting there watching videos instead of listening to music.
Hmm.
And so again, you compete with everything. So you have to, I think as a program director, you really have to have an idea of who you're speaking to, and then you just have to super serve that audience, which we always did, but you have to be super local.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's a shift from, it may be a shift from what I did. I mean, I always had a strategy anytime I went into a city to work on a radio station, and the first thing was to never make it like any other city.
Right.
Wilmington was Wilmington.
Yes.
I never
Hmm.
tried to make Philadelphia sound like anyone else. You would be run out of Philadelphia doing that. Same thing with New York.
Yes.
Same thing with Atlanta and
Mm,
and these other places. If you don't do, but what my thought process was at the time and still is to think globally but act locally,
mm,
right?
mm.
Because people will get their stuff from everywhere else. I mean, you've got Steve Harvey that you can listen to,
Mm.
you got Ricky Smiley, you can listen to DL Hughley, just all of these other syndicated products that you can listen to all the time. So if you want to be competitive, again, you have to think globally but act locally and bring everything to your market and make it relevant to your station and all of that. And so, again, as I said, I never was one into going into changing a station to what I thought it should be.
Mm.
Because the only thing I thought it should be was to be able to super serve the city and market that it was in.
One thing about you and my husband that y'all have in common, other than comedy, is the fact that you listen well. And I think
Mhm.
that that's why you've been able to be so successful because you get into the community. You came to our barbershop, you met people, you connected with people, even though you were like the quiet person sitting over in the room. And then you get on the radio and you're that guy, LL
Mhm.
Ken J. And I do appreciate what you said about you have to think globally and then still think community because that's kind of where we are now. The one other thing I wanted to ask is there are people are still going to school for broadcasting. Like you said, you have some students that you're going to be speaking to at Norfolk. What do you say to, because in college at Winston State, I worked on the radio station there as on Quiet Storm, and my on-air personality name was Elijah Blue, which is Cher's kid's name. But and you don't realize all the things as a musician that you do to connect with radio and back and forth. I mean, so the two are sort of tied together because you have musicians that stepped out and started doing podcasts. I mean, I'm one of them. But I'm talking at the first onset of podcasting and what it was. Musicians rebranding themselves to try and stay relevant, but there are people who are students of broadcasting, and there are kids that I've heard recently say, what is it worth to even go to school for that, or what other things can open up, because I feel like this is a better situation than even back then when we had just the traditional means that you could get put on. I mean, there are millions of ways seemingly that people can find their niche on this platform. So could you speak to that a little bit? About the future of broadcasting in terms of going to school for the educational. Is it worth it?
I'm gonna say yes, it's worth it in the fact that it's good to have a base in it, right? I mean, I don't think you can do anything without having a base unless you're raised in it, meaning that I can't, and it's interesting, I just had a black farmer on one of our podcasts, but just because I like horseback riding or
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that I can go and have a farm. And so,
Right, right.
unless you grew up, and one thing he does, he's raising his son on the farm. So again, I can't, just because as I was a kid, I used to cut lawns and like to, plant trees and all that doesn't mean
It
again
makes
that I
sense.
can be a farmer. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to have a base in what it is that you're trying to do. But you just have to keep your eyes open to how it works. Again, I knew a little bit of TV. I did some TV in school. I did some journalism in school. I did some, engineering in terms of music. We used to have live bands perform at our college all the time, and I would do the board mix and set up the microphones. And
Nice.
so again, I had a little bit of everything. Nowadays they teach you when you go to school, social marketing is a part of a course that they offer there. And that's very important for
Yeah,
what it is
yeah.
that you're doing, because nowadays you have to be where your listeners are. Back in the day, there weren't very many places that your listeners were, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other than, church, school,
Mm-hmm.
work and things of that nature. So, and in the car.
Right.
So like I said, now it is good to have a base in what it is that you want to do. So I'm not going to say no, it doesn't make sense to go to school for it. But again, it depends on the school. It depends on what they offer, how broad their curriculum is,
Mm-hmm.
and what it is that they teach.
Okay. For the most part, I think that the intimidation of social media has really had its impact on all of us individually because people don't know where to
Mhm.
start. And then there are all these places where you can spend your dollars. I mean, we all can go to the University of YouTube for free
Mhm.
subsequently,
Mhm.
but um, what would be the one thing that you would give to a group of people? We know that the urban landscape is changing, the country's changing. And without getting too deep, even the sound of urban AC is changing because people are feeling that maybe this music did, um, I hear conversations all over the place, so I don't want to, be out of step with what I'm about to say. But people are getting back to more of an R&B sound. We're thinking that maybe we should be shifting because the community of urban listeners, which we used to pinpoint was a certain group of people, but that's not the case. Everybody listens to urban AC radio,
Right.
in our marketing more. But what is media, especially Black owned media's role? And how do you see yourself in that landscape?
Let me go back to the early part of the question is, and this is where it gets a little bit negative towards radio. There are not a lot of pure just radio jobs out there anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
the role of the program director is different. And again, as I said, it includes social media and it includes events and things like that. And it's interesting because later in my career, as I said, it got really focused into digital. It also got really focused into curating events. We
Okay.
would, we would, we used to do in New York, a Halloween event that was a masquerade party, right?
Like
So
remotes or something different? Because I
no,
was
I mean
thinking
we would
old
have
remotes.
no, we would have events like our for Halloween we would do our own event. It was a
Oh, your own
Halloween,
event, not
yeah,
someone.
we would
Okay,
do it.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So really, you have to think about it's not just on air, but it's social media. It's again curating events for different things, whether it's the city's biggest office party, right? So
Okay, all
you
right.
yeah for a holiday, so you have an office party. You have a party that, hey, your office can have their party at our, the city's biggest office party type of thing. But you'll have to curate those events as well as, again, these ideas for social media. One of the things we had the artist Tank, when he came to our station in New York. We had him skateboarding down the hallway, right? And we captured that on video, and that was on social media, on YouTube or whatever. Um,
Okay.
just different things like that. So,
So,
as I
so
said, the pure radio jobs are not there anymore, right? It's just a lot more.
So, in a lot of ways, that sounds positive to me. That sounds like program directors have transitioned into even being more involved in community than ever before. Because before that, you kind of sat behind the board until someone called you out for a remote, and then everybody got to see what you look like. So this is, it sounds like a good thing, in a lot of ways. And then tell me about your media company and how you came up with that name.
Well, there's a story behind Line Media, but and again, the short version is I played the Mino Lion in a school play in high school. So that's the short version of it. There's a lot more that's
You
involved
look
in it,
like a lion with that
but
weird, I don't know.
yeah. So, but that's the short version of it. But again, listen, I created my first podcast back in 2007, and it was
Wow.
before, it was like right when iTunes like started
Hmm.
doing its thing, and I created this podcast, and it was a monthly podcast at that time because it really wasn't set that weekly was the thing to do, and again, it was early on in podcasting, and then ironically 10 years later I did my second podcast, and DL Hughley was the host of the podcast.
Hmm.
And we did about 46 episodes. We did it for about a year. And it was really good. It started to gain a lot of uh, um, traction, but a lot of the things that I've done in my career have really been ahead of the curve. And so
Yeah,
if
yeah.
if I had started DL's podcast in 2020 when like George Floyd happened, it would have been a different world,
Yeah.
but we started it in 2017.
Hmm.
And I remember, a salesperson telling me, and the guy who was the head of uh, um, podcast and all of that for this big company that I was working with, said to me, well, can't DL just tell jokes and things like that? And I'm like, he
It's
tells
not.
jokes on stage. This is something totally different. He really is about the community and all of that.
Right.
And so again, this was all pre George Floyd, which
Mhm.
again, people didn't, black people loved hearing that from him,
Right.
but everyone else did not.
Right. Stay in your lane, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah, pretty much. So
Uh-huh.
again, so Mino Line kind of came out of those experiences, and then what happened with the pandemic, and then just me knowing, programming, who my audience was, African Americans, the age group, women being a dominant part of that, and so again, it's come to this podcast network where I have, about 20 shows on there.
Okay.
A couple of them are limited series. So some of them are gonna go away because it's just like music. I put a podcast on, and I put it on for a reason, and it's not doing what I wanted to do, and
Hmm.
but that goes to the other thing that I would tell people is that just try something out. You've
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
take a chance on it. You got to have reasons why you want to do it,
Yes,
right? You don't want to
absolutely.
do it just because someone else is doing it, but try something different, try something unique, try something that you're passionate about, and then go from there. So,
Now you know you're preaching to the choir over here. I need you to
right.
stop that because that's exactly what this is. And
Right.
I am so honored that you would come on my podcast, really. And and at the time that with doing radio, with doing the radio show, it was
Mhm.
why would I do a podcast? I'm already doing a radio show, and I really didn't dig deep into what the value of my spoken voice was to those who enjoyed that when I'd speak in between playing the music.
Mhm.
But I really appreciate you coming on because I've even learned something from you today. It's really it's a lot. The future looks a lot brighter after talking to
Mhm.
someone who has been in the grind. I mean, you've been in the trenches with radio. 30
Mhm.
years to a younger person is some of them their whole life, their whole
Mhm.
lives, and so I think that for someone like yourself to be able to transition in this space
Mhm.
post George Floyd is very important. And so my last question is going to be tailored it's tailored to who you are as a person, the person that I know you to be, who really cares about community, who really cares about this community. And you know, in the space where we are in our communities, in our country, in our world right now, what is your hope for what that will come out of what it is that you're doing with your business now? Are you feeling that maybe I've done my work, I'm going to sit down after a while, I'm going to retire, let the young people take it from here? I still think you have a strong voice.
No, retirement is not necessarily a thought at this point in time. I think, listen, the world the way it is right now is absolutely crazy. And
Yeah.
I will say for Black media, what happened back in November of 2024, um, that has set us back. and it set us back in terms of being able to monetize what it is that we do right now.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, as you saw, all of these companies, these big name companies pulling, and I hate to even, foster that whole concept of, DEI, because DEI is not just black, right? And so, but those people are pinning black people to DEI. And so that perception is what is could affect black media in terms of being able to monetize and people being able to make revenue based on what it is that they do. However, though, I think that time also made it even a stronger point for black media to step out there and be a part of it. Um, and I think people will be seeking that out. And I still believe that, there are other stories that, and I appreciate some of these major TV outlets are doing more to tell, black stories, but it's still never enough, right? You and I may not get to speak on, the Today Show. We may not get to speak on CBS This Morning or even MSNBC, but we can speak here and we can tell people via social media that we're here,
Yeah.
and people will hear these conversations and could think more frequently that they have a chance to do something that they want to do
Yeah.
by not just seeing it on one of these big network TV shows. So again, I think black stories, black voices, and brown voices are what it is that I'm about
Yeah.
and what I want to continue to do. The goal again is to be able to continue to monetize it so you can make a living at doing what it is that you want to do.
Absolutely. I will say that that is one of the reasons that, I wanted to do this podcast because I am still connected to community. And I think numbers are not as important as the quality of the people that you are affecting. If
Mhm.
10 people are able to go and do powerful things based on a conversation that you all had in a small setting, then that's even, that to me is far greater than having a conversation with thousands of people and, well, one or two can do great things, but I'd rather have 1,000 viewers engaged than to have 10,000 followers and only two of them are engaged.
And that's been the basis of what I've said, even in Black radio, because as we, bringing us back to Black radio, I've said all along, to salespeople when I have conversations with them about it, I'm like, you need to tell these car dealers, yeah, that pop station may have, 500,000 listeners, and your
Mhm.
station may have 125,000 listeners, but you run a commercial on that station, you're not going to get 500,000 people to come through. You
That's
may
right.
get three people to buy a
That's right.
car. But
That's
if you
right.
advertise on this 125,000, audience station, you may get 10 people to come by
Yeah.
because of what that
It's the value.
station,
Yeah.
how they connect with their audience. So you may get 10 people to buy a car. And that's the key. It's not about how many people you reach an audience, it's about how many people walk in to buy
Mhm.
your car. And I think advertisers need to understand that. I think the one thing that we're finding is that there are a lot of different brands out there, and is these people want to, get their brand embraced by a community and by an audience. You know what I mean?
It's got to be
Using a
consistent.
use, but using a brand that those people connect with more.
Right.
I may
Right.
sit here and watch MSNBC. And all that stuff is flying by me, but I might be listening to my favorite podcast, and a host that I really have a connection with says, "Hey, try this," or "This is something that these people are really trying to be a part of the Black community and what have you," and you may get something from that. So again, that's an argument that I've been having for years and years and years, and still continue to fight that. And
Well, you don't
it
have to
is what it
fight it
is.
because it is true. Because whatever I tell my teenager, someone else will
Mhm.
tell her and she'll believe it.
Oh no, that happens all the time. Right. I mean, they just don't want to hear it from you. And, I had a radio station where the operations manager couldn't believe he's like, when they started looking, measurement of radio listening has changed so much, but they could
Hmm.
see when people are listening to the station. And he was like, man, people listen to your station and they listen through the commercial breaks. I'm like, of
Right.
course. I'm
Yeah,
like, of course they do, because they want to
right.
hear what else is going on in the community that might benefit them and their lives. So
Yes.
it's not just about the music.
And that's ending there. That's exactly what bringing everything local, bringing everything to community, finding your niche, whether it's your, your culture, um, your neighborhood, your favorite baseball or basketball team, whatever your niche is, have a conversation with the people who are willing to have a conversation with you. Break bread with someone who's willing to break bread back with you.
Hmm.
You can be yelling into the wind and get nowhere.
Hmm.
But I appreciate you saying that. And Ken, you hadn't changed a bit. Cuz
And you never know, we may be cousins because you know how this all works.
okay, you all
So
are from
they,
DC. That you don't have to take that up with Chris because my maiden name was Robinson.
yeah,
Well,
I'm
listen, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the Hey Cuz podcast today.
sure, no problem.
We are going to share this good message, and hopefully you'll be able to come back at some point. I know that you're a very busy person, but at some point, if we have a panel or something, you can come back and give us good guidance
No
on,
worries.
I'm gonna go and tell y'all, you could not say the dumb stuff in the room and Ken Johnson not say something eventually. It had to get real dumb, and then it was like, yo, this is not that, and that is not
Yeah.
this.
Well, listen, there have been plenty of rooms where I've bitten my tongue because there were a lot of dumb stuff said, and I just didn't want to jump into it. So,
Hey, we have to be willing to be in the season of tongue biting. There's nothing
mhm.
wrong with that. Until next time, bye,
Next.
cuz.
See, cuz. Hey, this is Ken Johnson, and you're watching the Hey Cuz podcast with Silivea J.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Hey Cuz podcast with me, your host, Silivea J. I hope that you will like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to post your comments. We'd love to hear from you.